So zooming in on the first noteworthy findings, there were 458 reported juvenile stays in jail from January 2009 through October 2012. Males accounted for 92% of these juvenile stays, and the primary age was 17. 64% of the juveniles were 17 years old, 35% were 16, and only 1% of the juveniles were 15 years old in jail. While there was an extremely wide range in the length of stays, the average length of stay was 140 days spent in jail. And of these youth, 9% spent more than 1 year in jail, including 6 individuals who spent over 2 years in jail. In 72% of the cases, a robbery or assault charge led these juveniles to be held in jail. 47% of the time it was robbery and 25% were assaults. And finally, a disproportionate number of juveniles in jail were either black or Hispanic compared to their ratio in the general population. And Haley will discuss this discrepancy further when she analyzes individual statewide graphs.
Okay, so now we're going to move into some specific graphs to illustrate our noteworthy findings a little bit more specifically. And these are the 6 most interesting graphs that we found, but you can find about 10 in the report, so I'd be happy to answer any questions about this data once we get to question and answer session. But these are by far the most interesting. And so all of these graphs are going to be for all 450 juveniles that were reported, unless I say otherwise, because there were a few counties that didn't provide all the information that we asked for, but most of them are coming from data for a vast majority of the juveniles that we received information on. And so the first graph shows the number of juveniles in jail by year, and there's a clear decrease of the number of juveniles in jail over time. And so the number of juveniles in 2012 is less than half of the number in 2009, which is interesting, and we don't have any particular explanation for why we might be seeing this trend. And it's important to note that our information for 2012 only was through October, so it's likely that there are a few more juveniles in 2012, but that's, I think, not enough to explain this decreasing trend over time. And then the next graph is going to show juveniles in jail by county. So not surprisingly, King County holds, or not a majority, but the most juveniles in jail of all counties with 43%. And King County only has 28% of the state population, so there is a disproportionate number of juveniles in jail in King County. And then the second highest county for holding juveniles in jail is Yakima. And this was especially interesting because Yakima ranks 8th in the state for population, so they're holding a really high number. Yakima has 4% of the state population, but 21% of the juveniles in jail. And so that's, I think, the most exceptionally high number that we found for any county. And then there are also a few counties that held a notably low number of juveniles in jail that I'd like to point out. So Snohomish County is the 3rd most populous county in Washington, and they're clearly not even on this graph. They held 3% of the juveniles in jail, but they have 11% of the Washington population. So we didn't have the time or resources to look into what policies they might have for why they would have such a low number of juveniles in jail, but that might be interesting to look into. And then Thurston County was the only county out of the largest 10 that reported that they actually don't hold juveniles in jail. In a phone interview with their prosecutor, they said that they hold their juveniles in the juvenile detention center instead of the jail, which is interesting. So that's another place that I think it would be definitely fascinating to look into and see if they might have any good policies in place or good models, especially just to see how that works out for them, since it's not the norm to be holding the detention juveniles in the GDC. And so moving on to the next graph, this shows juveniles in jail by race. So one of our really significant findings was a large overrepresentation of black juveniles in jail. So 37% of the juveniles in jail are black, and only 4% of the Washington state population is black, so that's really, really high overrepresentation. And then we also found overrepresentation for Hispanic juveniles. 19% of the juveniles in jail are Hispanic, but only 12% of the state population is Hispanic. And an important thing to note about this is that only a few counties, just Yakima County and a couple of small counties, even included Hispanic as a category in their racial data. So most importantly, King County, which has almost half of the juveniles, they didn't include Hispanic in their data to us. So we have reason to suspect that the overrepresentation of Hispanic juveniles could be maybe even as high as the overrepresentation of black juveniles. So that would be a good place for further research as well. And then, and the racial data was only available for 404 juveniles. We weren't able to get race from Pierce County, but it's still a vast majority of the juveniles we were analyzing. And then the next graph is going to show length of stay, and this data comes from 380 juveniles. So as Max mentioned, the average length of stay was 140 days, or 4.7 months. As you can see, there's a really high number of juveniles in jail for less than 3 months, 41%. are in for less than 3 months, and so that pulls the average down for the rest. So I think the most important thing to take out of this, even though it looks small in comparison, is that there were 43 distinct individuals who were in jail for more than a year, and obviously jails are not designed to be holding people for long periods of time, so that's especially problematic when you get to policies in jail and the lack of good educational services in jail compared to JDCs. And we also found 6 unique individuals who were in jail for over 2 years, and so one reason for this would probably be lengthy trials, since any kid who gets a sentence of over a year is going to be transferred to the JRA, so that suggests that their trial must have lasted over a year or even longer. And then the last 2 graphs are going to go into the charges of the juveniles in jail. And so this first one shows the most common charges that we found. As we already mentioned, robbery and assault are by far the most common, and then after that, the most popular charges were burglary, property crimes, murder, rape, and probation violation. And then the next graph shows just the breakdown of robbery and assault compared to all other crimes. And we put this one in just to highlight that almost 3/4 of all crimes, or all charges that land juveniles in jail, are arguably the 2 least serious charges that can lead to an auto-declination. And we will address that fact later in our policy recommendations. So these are the most significant graphs that we found for our statewide data. As I mentioned, there are a few other graphs like gender, age, and I think a number of others in the report. And now Lauren is going to cover some interesting trends we found in specific counties.
When we analyze data from each county individually, most follow the statewide trends. However, within the 3 largest counties, there are a few trends that are worth exploring further. First, since King County had the highest instance of juvenile jail stays, we thought it would be interesting to look at the racial breakdown for each of the most prevalent charges, robbery and assault. This graph highlights the severe racial disproportionality that Black juveniles are charged with more robberies and assaults than white, Native American, and Asian juveniles. This is especially significant because Black juveniles are charged with 61% of all crimes in King County, but only 6.5% of the King County population identifies as Black. Also, King County only gave us race, not ethnicity, so we were unable to get data on Hispanic juveniles. However, Yakima County was one of the only counties that did report ethnicity. These data in the first graph reveal another instance of racial disproportionality, that Hispanic juveniles are charged with 65% of the crimes in Yakima County, although only 45% of Yakima County identifies as Hispanic. Yakima is also noteworthy in that so few Black juveniles are charged with crimes that they are included in the category of other. Another way that Yakima deviates from the statewide trends is that although robbery and assault make up the most prevalent charges, assault actually surpasses robbery as the most prevalent charge, which is unusual when looking at the statewide trends. Finally, Spokane County was the only county to provide us with information on where the juveniles were housed post-sentencing. This graph shows that 71% of all juveniles were held in jail post-sentencing, which is surprising for 2 reasons. First, Spokane has a much lower average length of stay than other counties in the state at only 2.2 months. And second, juveniles who are declined are often charged with serious crimes that typically warrant a sentence of longer than 1 year, meaning that immediately upon sentencing, they would be transferred to JRA. However, since this graph shows that 71% of juveniles are held in jail, that must mean that they were given short sentences and that they served the entire sentence in jail. We have no explanation for why so many juveniles are housed in jail post-sentencing, but this finding is unexpected and troubling since we've learned that JRA facilities are much more beneficial for juveniles than jails. On that note, Tori will now describe the different housing facilities across Washington State.
Thanks, Lauren. So we're going to make a switch right now from our aggregate data to our more observational interview data. So looking back at our 3 primary research questions, the third one was, what are the consequences of you spending time in jail? And from that question, we can put a few more further questions, such as, why does it matter where youth are held, and where is the best place to hold juveniles who are declined? In order to figure out the answers to these questions, what we did was, as Liz mentioned earlier, we wanted to see for ourselves where the youth were held. We also wanted to talk to those people who had firsthand experience with holding declined juveniles. We went on 5 facility tours, and in King County, we went to the Regional Justice Center, which is also referred to as the RJC. We also went to the Juvenile Detention Center, or JDC, in Seattle. Again, as Martha pointed out before, jails and JDCs are short-term housing facilities for adults and youth. And then in Pierce County, we went to the Pierce County Detention and Correction Center, referred to later on as Pierce County Jail, as well as Raymond Hall ADC. We also got to go to Green Hill School, which is in Chehalis, which is Juvenile Rehabilitation Administration, or JRA facility, which is a long-term housing facility, like a prison for juveniles. And you guys are welcome. We encourage you to ask more about the tours that we went on during the Q&A session because we have a lot of great experiences